All right, so while Joe Biden is out there trying to distract the country with gun control, which yesterday I talked about this same thing and I didn't know exactly what Biden was going to bring up, I have to say I'm pretty surprised. I mean, the assault weapons ban, that's all he could go. I mean, I understood that sort of like after Sandy Hook because, I hadn't talked about it in a while, and we were at that point, like 8 years removed from the expiration of the assault weapons ban. Some people could still remember it, but now in 2022, Joe Biden trying to reach all the way back to 1994 and saying, you know what we need to do to stop these school shootings? We got to bring back that law that was in effect when Columbine happened and all this crap started. A law that most people don't even remember, one. Two, the people that do remember it, remember that it was stupid and meaningless and just annoying. You had to have these guns with these stupid thumbhole stocks. Nobody's going along with the assault weapons ban. Like, you can only get away with that once. Because now the term assault weapons become a joke. Has been for years. I mean, it's just... so I'm not even going to get into that. It's a horse that's been beat to death. It was beat to death a decade ago. I mean, hell, Tucker killed it back when he was still on MSNBC. The shoulder thing that goes up. Okay? Assault weapons ban, it's been dead ever since. It's been a joke. And it's not about the guns. It's about, this is how Biden thinks he's going to distract from this dismal economy, from the fact that we are in a recession. I have to say, from what I've been seeing, the data from retailers, the trends, just sort of the anecdotes about, hey, we couldn't get any inventory in for months, and we just over-ordered. We ordered double, triple what we normally would order because everything that we got in, as soon as we could get a little bit of inventory in, it was sold immediately. People were paying. They didn't care what the price was. They would buy at any price. And so, we ordered 3 times as much inventory, and we paid, a per unit price that was like, 25 to 50% more than what we did before anyway, but it doesn't matter because we can, just raise our prices because people buy whatever. And then all of a sudden, all this inventory that people had ordered that had on order for a year, 6 months, 8 months, it all started flooding in. And all of a sudden, the store shelves in places like Home Depot and Walmart, consumer goods, we're not talking about food. Food, there's still a big problem with food, which I'll get into. But these consumer goods they're starting to pile up. We haven't reached a critical mass yet to where, we're going to have falling prices. After all, in the last CPI print, which, as we all know, CPI is incredibly understated, was 8.3%. Technically a deceleration because March was 8.5%. We will know soon what the May CPI print is, but that'll take another week or two. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that starting to slow down a little bit just because people can't afford stuff at this point. The economy is slowing down. All that inventory that all of these retailers ordered, it's starting to come in. They're getting stuff in stock, and now all of a sudden things aren't flying off the shelves the way that they were last year or even 3 months ago. And anecdotally, I can confirm this where I work. We have been waiting on shipments of goods for over a year, in some cases, depending on the product. And all of a sudden, within the last month or two, everything that we've been waiting on for months starting to show up. We're taking all these deliveries. And guess what? A lot less people walking through the door than there were 2 months ago. All of a sudden, as soon as we started getting stuff in, people started slowing up. And thankfully, where I work, we don't operate on, massive leverage like a lot of these big retailers do, and, that have revolving lines of credit, and they finance all their inventory, and so they're having to pay interest, usually high interest rates on all this inventory that they're sitting on. These are businesses that are tuned for just-in-time sales, basically, and they are tuned to not have stuff taking up a lot of space in their warehouses. They are tuned to get goods in and get them out the door because that's how you maximize profits. That's the way that you are the most that you can be the most efficient, but your business is also quite fragile. And so I think a lot of people in business are starting to feel this. We, of course, famously now this week, Jamie Dimon came out and he said that people should expect an economic hurricane. I would agree with him. And yeah, I hate to beat the old horse, but look, the Fed's raising rates. They've only raised them a little. They said they're going to raise them quite a bit more. It happens every single time. As soon as the Fed starts raising rates, they prick the bubble. And it's not just the stock market. It's our whole bubble economy. And so we're starting to see the collapse unfold. Now, how far will it go? I don't know. The Fed was able to blow the whistle and bring it to a stop back in 2018. Will they again? Maybe, maybe not. But as of right now, when we get this Q2 GDP print, I believe Q1 was like negative 1.2%. If we get Q2, it's very hard for me to see at this point, based on all of the hard data that I'm seeing and as well as anecdotal. Well, I almost said anecdotal data. The plural of anecdote is not data. I gotta remember that. But based on the anecdotes and the data that I've seen, very hard for me to see how Q1 was negative and Q2 will be positive. And I believe that's after seasonal adjustments, by the way. They do seasonal adjustments because the quarterly GDP prints are annualized. It's not a number, okay, how fast did we grow in Q1, or how fast did we grow in, or how much did we grow in Q1, how much did we grow in Q2? It's at what rate. And seasonal adjustments tend to make numbers look better, not worse. At least I believe that's the case in this part of the year. And considering that Biden is doing everything he can to make the perception of the situation as bad as possible, he's doing nothing to try to essentially cheer people up. Trump, for all his faults, something that he was very good at, and most Republicans are good at this to a certain extent, is basically being an economic cheerleader. Coming out, going on TV, going in public, and making people feel like, hey, the economy's doing well, and it's going to keep doing well. People tend to, just in their heads, they think of Republicans as being better for businesses and Democrats as being worse for business. But in particular, people thought of somebody like Donald Trump because he was a billionaire businessman, even if they didn't like him. They associated him with good business conditions. They didn't get the feeling that Donald Trump, even if they didn't like him, that he was going to be bad for business. That's not, that wasn't what they had against him. What they had against him was that, he was a lech, and he was a Russian puppet, and he was orange, but they didn't have, their problems with him were not business related. Biden, on the other hand, not only is he a Democrat, which is a bit of a demerit when you're talking about the economic psychology that people associate Democrats with being, tougher on business, but he in and of himself comes across as incompetent, demented, and he's blaming our domestic economic problems on Putin, and people aren't buying it. The Putin's price hike thing has run its course. Nobody's buying that anymore. That thing's over. And as of today, Biden is still out there talking about Putin's price hike. He's talking about green energy. And he's doing nothing to try and make people feel like things are going to get better in the future. He's not giving them any indication. He's not giving them any hope, like what I talked about yesterday. You don't have to get everything done before the midterms. But if you give people the impression that you're moving in the right direction, that you are trying to bring down fuel costs, energy costs, that you're trying to bring down inflation, if people believe you, they will not spend their money as quickly. They will not go out and try and just consume everything off the shelves and drive up inflation. And you know what? Maybe that's what we're seeing. Maybe that's why we're seeing inventories start to pile up, because people are not as concerned about inflation as they were before. Somehow I doubt that. It doesn't seem like people are less concerned about inflation, but I think there are probably other factors perhaps driving that. I think that people are just getting priced out of the market for a lot of goods, and they're not able to consume as much in terms of quantity as they used to. I think consumers are getting squeezed. We certainly see that in the consumer credit, which I don't believe is topped yet. I haven't looked at the chart, but it looks like consumer credit is still on its way up. But people running up their credit card bills in the aggregate, not a great sign for our economic future. Honestly, I follow this stuff day by day. I don't fully understand what his big proposal to fight inflation is. I keep hearing that there's going to be some kind of bill coming up in Congress. Is it a stimulus bill, which by definition is inflationary? Is it price controls, which would be catastrophic? I don't think that's what we're talking about. I haven't heard any rumblings about price controls. I think Jimmy Dore just put out a couple videos trying to push Biden, towards price controls. I didn't watch them, but that was the impression I got. So I don't think that Biden's doing that, or else people wouldn't be telling him, hey, Biden, you need to bring in price controls. Also today, I believe Biden, he's tiptoeing towards saying that Ukraine's going to have to give up land, that essentially Ukraine's going to have to do land for peace. And he didn't quite go that far. The New York Post is trying to say, he said Ukraine's going to have to cede territory. He's not there yet. He's getting there. Henry Kissinger is there. More and more people are getting there. And as soon as Kissinger flipped, you knew that it was coming for the rest of the folks in the West. It was going to take a little bit of time. Kissinger's one of the more reasonable people in the West. And by reasonable, I don't mean that, I agree with him. I just mean that he can think, and, he may be 95 years old, but he's still pretty quick-witted. Joe Biden, he's pretty darn slow, despite being 20 years younger, 15, 20 years younger than Kissinger. Now, we also got a non-farm payroll report today. I believe it was 390,000. With hiring being better than expected, that does not bode well for people who are looking for the Fed to cut off rate hikes already over the stock market. It seems to me that the Fed is willing to continue rate hikes until they break something in the real economy. They don't seem fazed so far by the retracement of the stock market, which in and of itself is a bit of a change. I would say that if I thought that the Fed was going to pivot over stocks, that they would be starting to soften their rhetoric a little bit more. And they haven't yet. And I think that this jobs report will probably give them the encouragement that they're on the right track in not paying attention to the stock market. And I'd have to agree, in a very limited sense. I don't agree with what the Fed is doing for the most part anytime. And I hope the Fed does continue until they really break something and we get into a real financial crisis, because we need to finish what was started back in 2008. The Fed will have a much tougher time trying to undo what they started in 2008, if it is restarted now, because essentially what they did back then was they hit the pause button. They took wallpaper and papered over a gaping wound. And that wound has festered now for going on 15 years. And so it's gotten worse and worse. The malinvestment has piled up more and more. And the Fed has expended a lot of its ammo. The Fed, as we all know, does not have very far to cut if they were going to cut rates. They've already been doing QE for over a decade. They've been doing it since way back in 2008. What is more QE going to do? We already had QE infinity, and all that could barely do was maintain the system. And so, how are they going to fix another 2008 crisis if we get there? What new idea can they come up with to try and hit the pause button again? To be a bull in this market, to me, is a bet that the Fed is going to come up with some extraordinary measures and that they're going to work. Because at this stage, it appears that they are walking down the path of pricking the bubble. They are not satisfied with this mere pullback in the stock market. And I think that if inflation were to print, let's say, instead of at 8.3%, at like 7%, I don't think that would be enough for them. I think that they probably at least want to get inflation down to 5%. But officially, they still claim their target is 2%. So, of course, I can't say with confidence, nobody can, where we'll be by November, by the time the election rolls around. But I ain't looking good. We could be neck deep in the crisis at that point. But as far as I'm concerned, that's exactly where we need to be. We need to rip off the Band-Aid, and we need to amputate this growth. Because that's the way you need to think of a lot of the economic so-called growth that we've had. It's like a growth on your body. It's unnatural. It's a cancer. It's just the product of the Fed steroids that they've injected into us over, well, not just the past decade, but multiple decades. And the longer they've let it grow without being removed, without being cut off, without being purged, the more painful it will be when we ultimately have to be separated. But the road to recovery will not begin until we go through with it. And so I look at potential economic collapse of this sort as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for the American economy to finally get back on the right track. But will we get there? I don't know. Joe Biden certainly isn't doing anything to help avert us from that destination. He unwittingly, I don't think he would want to if he knew where he was taking us, because he doesn't want to inflict short-term pain if it means long-term prosperity. He wants short-term prosperity, just like every elected politician. They want things to be as good as possible while they're in office, and whatever happens to the country after that, well, that's their successor's problem. It's not their problem. And that's what's led us to this point. But if Joe Biden's own incompetency is what brings on the real crash, the crash that we have needed so badly for so long, I may just end up thanking him. But for now, the jury is still out. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.